We were stringing beans. Hello and welcome. We are True Crime and Wine Couple. However, today we'll be sampling some cider from Angry Orchard. This is Tangerine. We'll also be kicking off our new series, Tales from the Vine, where we tell you the story of a ripped from the headlines case, which we'll be doing today. Today we will be examining the case of Sheila Murray. Disclaimer, this case is not for the faint of heart. If you have any problems listening to issues of neglect of the elderly, if you have any problems with medical type things, or if you have any problem with elimination messes like urine or feces, this is not the story for you. But if you'd like to hear about a very important case that was just covered by Court TV, stay with us. The case of Sheila Murray. Sheila Murray was a mom of 3 and a wife of a retired Navy officer and police officer. Married to her husband for over 45 years and living in Johnson City, Tennessee, a picturesque town with a population of 72,000, known for its stunning state parks and plentiful outdoor activities. Sheila was described by her middle adult child as being a big lady who was a good, strict mom, and she knew no stranger, typical of Southern hospitality, and being famous for her fried chicken, which members of the family and the community would come sniffing around to get a bite whenever Sheila made her famous fried chicken.
I'd be there.
Sheila's daughter Sonia was married with her own family and living 3.5 hours away in Chattanooga. Sheila and her husband, Tony, which was what he was called, lived together with their adult children, Karen, 49, and Michael, 43. Tony was the sole provider for the family, as Karen and Michael had held down jobs before, but were not working at the time of the crime. Sheila enjoyed good health until she had her first stroke in 2015, which left her less mobile, but able to speak and still mostly take care of herself with some help from her husband. Sadly, Sheila's independence was short-lived because Sheila had another stroke and blood clots in 2018, which left her immobile, unable to speak, and unable to care for herself. This put Sheila temporarily in a nursing home. However, her husband felt that he and his adult children could care for Sheila at home, citing finances and pride as his reasons for this. On August 20th, 2019, John Shelton and Joshua Jenkins, an EMT and paramedic, responded to a routine call. When they arrived at the residence, they were met at the door by Edwin Murray, who was called Tony. Shelton stayed with Tony to obtain information, and Jenkins headed to Sheila Murray's room. According to testimony, the home was oppressively hot with a terrible odor. 68-year-old Sheila Murray was found in her room, wearing only a white t-shirt and a soiled diaper in a hospital bed, covered in feces and urine, both at different stages. Some urine was fresh and wet, some had dried and crystallized, and some had soaked into the mattress where it permanently dried, leaving a rusty brown stain. As for the feces, it was everywhere, in various stages of not only fresh and dried, but moldy. There was no covering over the mattress. One of Sheila's eyes was matted shut, and her neck was covered by a horrible yeast infection from moisture caused by drooling, as Sheila had great difficulty swallowing. In addition to the filth and infection, Sheila also had multiple injuries, to include bed sores from not being moved, as Sheila was immobile, and a compound fracture to her foot with exposed, dried bone. None of Sheila's wounds were covered or dressed, and all were caked with feces. Realizing the serious nature of the situation, along with the trauma the victim had experienced, the 2 men called for 2 members of the fire department to assist with a draw sheet removal of Sheila, basically transferring her to a flat sheet held by 4 men. When moved onto her side in preparation for the draw sheet, Sheila let out a scream that one of the first responders described as a scream of pain, although Sheila was nonverbal. The extent of Sheila's injuries and trauma was such that she died in the hospital on August 15th, 5 days later. The charges. In March of 2021, a Washington County, Tennessee grand jury indicted 40-year-old Michael Murray and 45-year-old Karen Murray, that was their ages at the time of indictment, on charges of first-degree murder based on a TBI investigation, which determined that Michael and Karen were responsible for both abuse and neglect of their mother, resulting in her death. TBI is Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and why they employed them was because Sheila's husband had been a police officer, so they didn't want to interfere in the investigation. They were arrested and booked at the county jail on $250,000 bond each. Their father, having passed away on November 15th of that same year, was not indicted. The prosecution claims that on August 10th, 2019, Sheila lied in her bed until 5:30 p.m., never attended to, which includes being given food, water, or hygienic assistance. The trial. EMT John Shelton testified that he had been on hundreds of calls, and the heat and smell of the home, as well as the extent of Sheila's injuries, led to this incident being one of his worst 5 calls. He recalled being met by Tony and Karen, who approached him, saying that they did the best they could. As he approached Sheila's room, the stench grew progressively worse, and he noticed Sheila in a terrible condition, lying on a bare, soiled mattress, covered in vomit and feces, with her ankle bones sticking out of her skin. Shelton declared it was one of the worst cases of out-and-out neglect he had ever seen. When on the stand, he was given a picture of Sheila after she was cleaned up at the hospital. He was asked to draw the feces he had found on her ankle with a black Sharpie. He also testified to moving Sheila along with the paramedic and firefighters, and Sheila screaming with what he described as pain. The attending physician, Dr. Christy Lawson, also testified. Dr. Lawson was a trauma surgeon with 14 years' experience who was on call the night Sheila was admitted to Johnson City Medical Center. She is also a professor of surgery at Tennessee State University and a published author. Not only did she attend to Sheila, she was also called as an expert witness for the state. Dr. Lawson's testimony supported Shelton's, and she went on to testify about the condition Sheila arrived at the hospital in, as well as other complications Sheila had. These included malnutrition, muscle loss and atrophy, dehydration. Sheila's muscles and joints were drawn into her body from the stroke. Her broken foot had dried bone exposed. It was thought that Sheila had a mastectomy. However, it was determined that her breast was stuck under her armpit, and because of necropsy, the breast tissue and breast had died, as Sheila could not move her arms or extend her joints. The doctor also testified that Sheila was covered in wounds, bruises, bed sores, had injuries to her genitals and anus. Sheila's tibia bone was also sticking out, and the rest of her ankle wound had dried from not being cared for. The doctor also testified, and this really is the worst part, that Sheila was cognizant when she was admitted to the hospital, which you can tell because she screamed. The evidence of this was Sheila tracking those attending her with her eyes, and Sheila would moan. At one point, the doctor rubbed Sheila's head, as she often did to calm trauma patients, and a tear slid down Sheila's face. When shown a photo of Sheila, the doctor cried. The doctor said Sheila was malnourished and dehydrated, and she could see every rib. Sheila's abdomen was sunken in from malnutrition, and it was so bad Sheila had lost bone and muscle mass. The doctor also testified that Sheila was in such poor physical condition that cleaning her resulted in even more injuries. The doctor said Sheila was among the worst patients she had ever seen in over 14 years. And Sheila had suffered for weeks to months, given the breast necrosis alone. Sheila's middle child, Sonia, also testified. She was the only member of the family not living in the home. Sonia lived in a suburb of Chattanooga with her husband and children. She lived about 3.5 hours away, and she said she would visit about every 3 months, but would stay in a hotel, as the house was unkempt. She said the house was both cluttered and dirty, and conditions worsened with her parents' age. Sonia testified to Sheila's condition after each of her strokes. She also testified that her father wanted to bring Sheila home and that she did not feel the family could provide the level of care that Sheila needed. Sonia testified that she even offered to care for her mother in her home, but her father refused. She testified that what her dad said was law and that her brother and sister were obedient to him. She also said that her father had health conditions, yet he was the sole provider for the house. She said both her brother and sister had held down jobs, but neither was working at the time of her mother's death. She also testified that her sister was able to care for Sheila, minus lifting her, but that her brother, who was big and strong, could lift Sheila. Despite that testimony, Sonia also asked how Michael would care for his mother when he could barely care for himself due to immaturity. However, then she also said that he could care for her mother. Sonia testified that she had visited in February and July of 2019 and that her mother seemed okay, but she was covered up and she could only see her face. She did not move the covers to inspect her mother, saying that her mother was often cold. A visiting nurse was assigned to Sheila and also came every 3 months. However, Karen canceled the visit for late July, early August because she wasn't feeling well. The visiting nurse did not follow up with the cancellation. Moving on to Sonia's testimony for August 10th of 2019, Sonia testified that her sister called her to say that Sheila had injured her foot. They couldn't get her out of bed and she was going to the hospital. Sonia testified that she had no immediate concerns at that time. The next day, Sonia asked to see Sheila via phone and immediately went to the hospital because her mother looked so bad. Sonia said that she saw her mother covered up again in ICU and knew she was dying. Sonia testified that the doctor was angry with her because he thought the family was lying, but she had no idea how bad her mom's ankle and general condition were. On cross-examination, Sonia testified that her father ran the show. He wanted to care for Sheila at home with her siblings' help, and although she voiced her concerns, she was overruled. She did say she made it known that her mom needed more care, but her father was stubborn and proud and wouldn't listen. She continued to reiterate that she thought her dad and siblings did the best they could. She also testified that she had no concerns that her mother would be given water, food, or kept clean. She said that she never thought her siblings or father would have left their mother to lie there like they did. She further testified that in court, her brother was 1/3 the size he had been when Sheila died, that her father had died 3 months later, and that her siblings continued to live in the house and didn't care for the home, but both were able to feed it and care for themselves and remain alive. The defense's argument was weak. It was that Tony called the shots, Karen and Michael had no choice in the matter, and just followed orders. The defense also did not cross-examine the witnesses vigorously, presumably because of the trauma they had all experienced in this case. Sonia had lost her mother to neglect. The EMT said he nearly vomited at the scene, and the doctor was in tears on the stand. Now, the verdict is very interesting because both Karen and Michael were found guilty on 4 counts. So the first count was count 1, was first-degree murder during commission of a felony, aggravated neglect. Michael Murray and Karen Murray were both found guilty of that charge. Karen and Michael were also found guilty on count 2, which was aggravated neglect of a vulnerable adult with injury. And they were also both convicted on the third charge, aggravated neglect of a vulnerable adult with physical harm. And the sentencing hearing will be scheduled for September 30th of this year. Now, the controversies. This is pretty interesting. Neither Karen nor Michael, especially Michael, appeared to be capable of caring for themselves, never mind somebody else. Michael looked to be maybe 100 pounds. So if Sonia said that he was 3 times the size, he had to have been 300 pounds.
Right.
And I saw you saw the pictures, right? Yeah. Their competency was alluded to when Sonia was cross-examined by a defense attorney, but it was totally glossed over, which that was confusing. And let me tell you, the court TV comments blew up with shock and awe over these, both what the brother and sister looked like, what Karen and Michael looked like, and also the fact that the sister, who seemed to be totally with it and have her life together, did not know that this was going on. Karen, to me, looked okay. Michael, it was really interesting. I showed you, right? He was picking his nose, rubbing his eyes and going like this, picking his hair. And I only say this, I don't want to diagnose anybody, and I only say this because of my background, but he almost looks like Tourette's, like he had tics almost. So it was difficult to tell, and I'd be very interested if other people watch it, but there's so little coverage of it on YouTube, whether or not other people felt that they were competent as well.
Right.
Okay. So what do you think?
Lots of questions. Something happened, it sounds like pretty dramatically. Because it sounds like, okay, she was in the nursing home, she came home, and it seemed like everything was still okay. They had the nurse coming in. I'm sure if there was an issue, the nurse would have raised questions at that point.
Yep.
The daughter was visiting every 3 months, so everything seemed to be, at least, if not ideal, at least not negligent.
Right.
And then something happened. And then they're calling off the appointment. It sounds like maybe the son was trying to move her and dropped her and broke her foot.
Maybe, and they were trying to cover that up. Maybe, yeah.
But what strikes me is the dad.
Right.
Ex-military, ex-law enforcement, ruled the home, ruled the roost. The kids don't sound like, well, definitely not responsible. Now,
no.
In terms of their intelligence and all of that, we have no idea, but we definitely know that they were irresponsible and barely able to take care of themselves, let alone somebody who's sick.
Able or unwilling.
Right.
The sister seems a lot more with it. The sister that lived in the home.
So my first thought is, and again, we're never going to know because the defense really did not push anything, is it sounds like the dad was running the show. And maybe the dad was getting sicker and he was not able to tell them what to do, or I don't know, and we'll never know.
Issues he had heart issues and he had kidney issues. I know that. That's what Sonia testified to.
And he died, 5 months after her?
3.
3 months. So he was declining during that period as well. So more of the responsibility was going on to the kids who probably couldn't handle the responsibility.
Right, either because they were incapable or they were not raised to do so.
Yeah, and again, we don't know.
We don't know. No, we do not know. Do you? This occurred to me last night. This occurred to me last night. Do you think he just said let her die? Like, do you think maybe they had a pact, and when she got really bad, she maybe said, hey, if I get like this, just let me die? But it's one thing to let somebody die, and it's another thing to let them suffer and die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
Right.
I don't know.
But I mean, malnutrition to the point where she lost bone.
And the whole breast thing, and the she had a compound fracture. The bone was sticking out.
Right, and
you can't let that needs to be taken care of right away.
And the doctor testified that it was so far gone that it had dried. I guess when it first, there's blood and there's marrow and there's but exactly. it had sat
so
there.
It had been days, minimum.
The doctor said weeks possibly.
But didn't the daughter say that they called and said she broke her ankle? Or was that when she was in the hospital? They said
no, they only told her that. They only they said she hurt her foot, but they did not say the extent.
So we don't know how long. We really don't know how long she was sitting there.
And why did the sister not inspect her? Wouldn't you inspect your mother if you knew she had all those issues? Like if she couldn't move her arms and stuff? I mean, I would certainly look under the covers, wouldn't you?
Not if you're not suspecting anything. If the mother's always cold, you're going to keep her covered up, and if you don't suspect something's going on, you're not going to automatically start looking for something to go on, right?
I think if it was my mother and I knew she couldn't move, I'd look under the cover. I would just want to see what position her body was in to make sure she was comfortable.
Maybe.
That's what I think I would do. I mean,
But obviously, when she was going there, there wasn't the issue with the feces and the urine either, because she would have noticed that. Even if she was covered up,
Yes,
you
right.
would know.
She said the smell was bad, but it was no worse.
But
than
that could
usual.
be like a dirty,
yes, right,
sealed up house. When the houses are sealed up, no air is coming through. There's a sick person in there.
right.
It has a smell.
Yeah.
And I've been in plenty of those houses, so I know what it smells like, and it's disgusting.
Right. I hope to never be.
No, but yeah, I would need to know more about the kids. I just don't know if they deserve to be found guilty on all these counts, because I don't know how much control they actually had. Like, how much of this is really...
Exactly.
Yes, they're adults, and yes, if you're a responsible adult, you're going to step up and you're going to do something.
Right.
But if you're an irresponsible, immature, possibly mentally slow person, you may not, and especially if you're terrified of your father. Mm-hmm. If he is running the roost, you're not going to step up. You're not going to say something, because you're going to probably pay for it if you do.
It was clear that there were major issues, and Sonia had basically washed her hands of that family. You could just tell by her
I'm sure she
demeanor
did,
on the
and that's
stand.
why she moved away, probably why she was 3 hours away and visited, very rarely.
And she had said she was close to her sister, but not with her brother.
And it would also sort of make sense, that control thing, of why he took her out of the nursing home, because he didn't have control, right?
Right, yeah.
I don't think it was finances with the law enforcement pension, a military pension, plus their Social Security.
Now, I did read his obituary, and you swear he was the greatest guy in the world according to his obituary, but that's what they always do.
Exactly.
You know how when
not only that,
if somebody's murdered, they're on ID. Oh, they lit up a room. Not everybody lights up a room, I'm sorry.
But I'm sorry, but some of these people, they will be one way behind closed doors.
Absolutely.
And they'll present themselves completely different in the public.
100%.
And the family's not going to say anything, because if they know if they say something, they know as soon as they get behind those closed doors, they're going to pay for it.
Now, why do you think Court TV covered this if no one else is? We've seen one psychologist cover it. She said by request. Do you think because it's going to be controversial? Do you think this might get
either that, or maybe whoever produces Court TV, somebody took an interest in this. Maybe.
Right. Yeah, that's
possible.
true. They could have. Yeah. Right.
So I don't know why they are exclusively covering it, but yeah, I never heard of it until you brought it to me.
And the only coverage you can get of it is to watch Court TV, and it's only on Court TV. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the reason for that, but this is a very disturbing case, and I'm going to be really interested to see how the judge handles it at sentencing.
It's going to be very interesting. Yes, the judge seems like a very sweet Southern lady. She's not like a Fran or an Auntie Beth.
Now I wonder if at the sentencing the defense is going to start maybe bringing up some of the
extenuating circumstances,
and the kids if the kids have issues, what those issues might be.
Right. And who's going to make victim impact statements if she's gone and her husband's gone? That's going to be interesting.
I had said that
right?
to you, right? Who's the victim?
Right.
The victim's
exactly.
dead.
Right. Yep.
And obviously she didn't have friends, because if she had friends, the friends would have been coming over, or other family.
They said the family was, quote, close-knit, very close-knit.
Well, probably because of him.
Well, and that's funny, they described the Watts family as that too. To me, that means kept to themselves, in my opinion. And like you said, kept to themselves because of the controlling patriarch.
Yeah,
or a controlling matriarch, but in this case, I'm thinking it was the patriarch that was the controlling guy.
I mean, sometimes you're close-knit just because you're a normal close-knit family and everybody gets along and everybody does everything. Other times you're close-knit because you don't have a choice.
Right. Yeah. I think that was...
Yeah. I really do. And I told you about that. I sort of referenced that movie, The Great Santini, with Robert Duvall back in, I don't know, it was like the 70s. It was an older movie. But, yeah, he's you don't mess. You don't dare contradict or go against what he says. And I'm just wondering if that was the dynamic in that house.
The only two cases I've seen that have this much neglect, and let's face it was abuse. That woman suffered.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Are probably the Turpin family And you've never seen the case of Lacey Fletcher. I told you,
No.
right? That girl lived on the couch for 12 years and was eating
You
the
told
couch
me,
and
yeah,
stuff.
you told me about it. I never,
That's the only thing I've seen as horrible as this, and I can't totally. Oh, and also, well, that was more torture and abuse. Shonda Vander Ark, because her son was basically starved, and but these vulnerable people, these cases are just horrifying.
And as a former firefighter EMT, I've never run into something like that. We've been on calls where, we have to bring in more manpower to, get the person out of the, they might be like on a third floor apartment down these skinny steps and they're, 400 or 500 pounds.
Right.
And you have to do the sheet thing. That's the only way you can get them out.
According to the doctor, she had no subcutaneous fat. There was nothing to the wound when they took her out of there. That's what the doctor had testified.
So why did they have to take her out like that? I wonder.
I think because of the trauma. Because see, what happened was, according to what the EMT testified, and they didn't have the paramedic testimony. That was strange. They called it as a routine call. And when they got there, they're like, oh, crap, this is not routine. This is trauma.
I'm also surprised they didn't call the police.
Yeah, me too. Well,
because that would be a normal thing to do.
From what they said, but maybe they knew he was a police officer. Maybe
even still, though, you want to get law enforcement there.
From
at least
what they said when they got there, they did not know what the hell was going on, and the only people that they had to talk to were Karen and the dad. And as the sister testified, the doctors were angry with her, so they didn't believe her story.
Yeah.
So that's probably
with that you call the cops because at that point you're this is an open call. They called you to be there, so you don't need a search warrant. The cops can come in and just sort of look around and
whether or not they were mentally competent. All they had to do was pick up the phone.
Again, but with the fear, what if they are totally mentally competent? I mean, why don't they work? What's up with that, first of all? But even if they are mentally competent, if you're scared to death,
well, they're strong beings,
and you're under the rule of the father, you're not going to make that.
And that's
call.
Your angle, huh? That's it.
That's the only thing I can think of it. That would make any sense.
Yeah, because I just don't think that they would have just left her there to die.
No, and also, who wants to live in filth like that?
Right.
Obviously the daughter didn't want to. She didn't even stay at the house.
Maybe like you said happened. He moved her and he dropped her, and the dad said nobody's moving her anymore because we're going to get arrested here. That could have happened too.
Well, thank you for saying that because that when you were telling the story, that was another thing that popped in my head. It's like if you're going to call somebody to come and get this woman, don't you think you'd clean her up beforehand?
Exactly. Yes.
Like let's clean her up and then we'll call the ambulance.
Right, exactly.
Let's spruce up the place a little bit.
But remember, when they moved her, she screamed. So maybe they did try to move her, and she was just reacting in that way, and they panicked.
I don't know.
It's just horrible. I don't know why Court TV covered it, but we were trying to do something current for you guys, and that's what we picked. That's what I picked. So I watched a lot of footage. So if you're interested, it's on Court TV. Also in our new format, we'll be featuring a winery, and you'll be seeing footage of a winery. So hopefully you enjoy the new format. You enjoy the new footage of the winery. Please please subscribe, leave a comment if there's something you want me to cover. I'm off for the summer now, so I have plenty of time to dive into it. The next thing we're going to be focusing on is your boy, Alec Baldwin and the Rust trial. That starts on Wednesday, so if you want to watch something that's a complete hot mess, I would recommend the Rust trial. It won't be someone died, but it's obviously not as disturbing or horrific as this is.
And I have already totally formed my opinion on that. So there's going to be that defense attorney. Right? That defense attorney has his job ahead of him if he wants to change my mind at this point.
We'll be talking about that too, right?
But so. Angry Orchard is our feature, cidery today, not a winery, but it's our feature cidery. And we were there the other day. If you've never been there, it's really a fun place to go.
It's a beautiful property.
It's huge property, beautiful.
You can get a tour.
Yes.
You can purchase tickets to hang out in the treehouse.
Yep, they have a huge treehouse.
Music all the time.
Yep, always
Food,
music.
they did food trucks on the weekends.
There was actually food there.
Oh, there was food there?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but not that the food truck wasn't going.
Make sure you bring your ID in, even if you're
Oh
our
my
age
goodness!
or older.
Yes, I don't care if you're 90 years old.
They scan that thing.
They make you take the ID.
Yeah, so make sure you bring your ID in if you go.
Yeah, but the cider there is fantastic. They have tons and tons and tons of different flavors. We chose this one because
This is
it's
amazing.
just so different.
This is so good.
I've never had anything like this. It's almost like eating a nectarine or tangerine.
They had a dry rosé one year. Remember, we loved
Mhm.
that, and then we could never get it again. But I like this just as much. It's delicious.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like it's like drinking a fresh tangerine, right? It's just they got the right ratio of
Yeah, it really is like
citrus. They certainly
tangerine
did.
juice, almost. But yeah, it's very. Oh, you know what? It's almost like. I think that's why I like this.
Why?
Do you remember way back? Do you remember Orangina?
Yes, I do.
Oh my God, I used to love Orangina, and this sort of tastes like.
Do you know that you don't have to go way back for Orangina? They sell it all over Europe. You can get an Orangina all over Europe.
Do they have an Epcot?
They do not have an Epcot, but they sell Orangina all over. It's very popular in the UK. You can get Orangina anywhere.
Wow, I did not know
in the
that.
little bottles.
Yeah.
It's in those little roundish bottles,
Yeah.
right? So let us know what you think of our new format. Hopefully you'll like it. We gave you the whole story. Hopefully you'll like us featuring the cidery. And
Yeah, so we'll be doing a different winery every time we do a show.
do a show from now on. We will also do our Unhinged lives.
Yeah, we'll do some Unhinged lives and have some fun with that. All right.
So we are True Crime and Wine Couple. We hope you enjoyed our story. Well, not that this is a story you could really enjoy, but hopefully you enjoyed the footage of Angry Orchard in upstate New York, and you enjoy our new format. And leave us a comment and let us know what you think.